Hey guys, tonight we step straight into a world that smells like wood smoke, sweat, and survival. You're waking up in a medieval village, no alarms, no soft pillows, no scented candles. Instead, you feel straw scratching your neck, something small and alive scurrying over your arm, and a chill so sharp it feels personal. You blink, trying to focus through the half-light, leaking through a cracked shutter, and realize that your bedroom is basically a corner of a Madame Dwaddle hut. You probably won't survive this, but let's see how far you get. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes fully now. The ceiling beams above you creak with every gust of wind. A chicken clucks somewhere inside the hut, because yes, you share living space with your animals. You can hear your breath in the cold, see it even, a pale ghost drifting from your mouth. The straw mattress beneath you feels damp, partly from condensation, partly because, well, there's no such thing as a waterproof floor when your home is built on dirt. Someone coughs a deep, rattling sound from the other side of the room. It's your neighbor, or maybe your father, or both. Personal space is a luxury here. The smell is a cocktail of smoke, wet wool, and humanity. You'd give anything for deodorant, but it won't be invented for a few centuries. You sit up, rubbing your arms against the chill. Your tunic made from rough, unwashed linen scratches like sandpaper. Fleas live in the seams. You scratch back, and one of them wins. It's not exactly the glamorous medieval fantasy from movies. No lute music, no gallant knights outside the window. Just you, a thatched roof that leaks every time it rains, and a long day ahead that starts before sunrise. The village outside begins to stir. You hear the blacksmith's hammer already ringing somewhere in the distance, echoing over the frost. The sound is oddly comforting, like proof that someone else is awake and suffering too. Chickens shuffle out of their pen. Dogs bark, probably fighting over a bone. And then comes the bell from the church tower, a dull, heavy sound rolling over the fields. That's your alarm clock. You slip on your shoes or, what passes for them? They're leather, cracked, and stiff from dampness. The right one has a hole in the sole big enough to let in a pebble, which you will feel all day. You tie them anyway because walking barefoot would mean frostbite by breakfast. You stretch and push open the rough wooden door. Cold air bites instantly at your face. The village looks like a painting done entirely in brown and gray. Muddy paths, sagging fences, smoke rising from chimneys that never stop burning. You step outside and your feet sink slightly into the mud. Congratulations, you're officially awake. Let's pause for a quick historical reality check. The average peasant in the 14th century slept on a straw or red mattress, sometimes with a thin wool blanket if they were lucky. There were no sheets, no pillows, and certainly no privacy. And because the hearth was in the center of the house, most families slept in a single room, parents, children, grandparents, and livestock included. It kept everyone warm, but also made lice, fleas, and respiratory infections a part of daily life. Historians still argue whether these sleeping arrangements were more about warmth or about fear because, in a world without locks, keeping everyone together meant safety. You wander toward the village well, the place where everything begins. The wooden bucket creaks as it drops into the icy water below. You pull it up, hand over hand, feeling the rope burn your palms. The water is murky, but it's all you have. You splash a handful on your face, and it wakes you up with a vengeance. Hygiene, as you quickly learn, is optional here. Soap exists, but it's made from animal fat and light smells like regret and burns if you're unlucky. Across the square, a woman is sweeping her doorstep with a bundle of twigs. She nods, a silent acknowledgement. Everyone's too tired to talk much before breakfast. Children chase each other through puddles, already covered in mud. You can tell who's wealthy around here. They're the ones wearing shoes that actually fit. You glance toward the manor house on the hill. It's not a castle, just a sturdier wooden structure with a tiled roof, but it might as well be another planet. That's where your Lord lives. He owns this land, the crops you'll plant, the taxes you'll pay, and technically your labor for several days a week. You'll work his fields before your own. A medieval subscription, plan mandatory, no cancel button. Back inside your hut, someone's stoking the fire. The hearth smokes more than it burns, filling the room with a haze that makes your eyes sting. The chimney, if you can call it that, is a hole in the roof. The air smells like burning peat and old cabbage. You think about how, in 1,000 years, people will have central heating, scented candles, and air purifiers. For now, your air purifier is an open door and wishful thinking. A cat sneaks past your leg. You're not sure if it belongs to you, but you let it stay. Cats are useful. They keep the mice from eating the grain. In some towns, cats are suspected of being witches' familiars. But around here, superstition takes a back seat to pest control. Still, it's best not to let the priest see you being too affectionate with it. A quick fun fact: medieval people did not actually think the world was flat. That's a later myth. Most peasants didn't think much about the shape of the earth at all. They were too busy worrying about crops, taxes, and the next rainstorm. And if they ever did look up at the sky, it wasn't to chart the stars, but to pray for mercy. The first light of dawn finally cuts through the mist. You can see the outlines of the surrounding fields, the narrow strips of land divided by hedgerows, the furrows waiting for the plow. You'll be out there soon enough, but for now, you take one deep breath and brace yourself. This is your life, day in and day out. No weekends, no holidays, except the church ones, which are basically mandatory sermons with a side of bread. You think about washing your tunic, but then remember there's no soap to spare. And besides, it'll just get dirty again in an hour. Clean clothes are for funerals or festivals. You pat down your hair, which is stiff with oil and ash, and decide it's good enough. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows a sound that's both beautiful and annoying when you hear it every single morning. It's time to start moving. You take one last look at your small hut, the crooked beams, the smoke stains, the cluttered tools hanging from nails. This is home. It's rough, but it's yours. And even though the future holds famine, war, and disease, for now, you just need to survive the next sunrise. Before you leave, you glance at the family's tiny altar wooden cross, a few candles made from tallow, a bunch of dried herbs hanging nearby. Faith is everything here. You whisper a quick prayer, not because you're especially pious, but because everyone does. If something goes wrong, it's better to have heaven on your side. Outside again, you hear laughter from the nearby cottages. Someone's telling a joke about the miller's wife and a donkey. You don't get the punchline, but it makes you smile anyway. Humor, even crude humor, keeps everyone sane. You think maybe you'll try making a joke later too, if your tongue doesn't freeze off before then. You take a final breath before heading to the fields, the cold air filling your lungs. The sky is pink now, streaked with smoke and mist. It's beautiful in a way, ugly, harsh, but real. The kind of beauty that reminds you life is fragile, but stubborn. You're part of that stubbornness now, one heartbeat among thousands. Keeping the Middle Ages alive, one frostbitten morning at a time. The first bite of morning hits like a hammer to the stomach. You've been awake for an hour, and your body already aches. But now comes the cruelest ritual of all breakfast. If you were imagining a cozy bowl of porridge or a plate of eggs sizzling in butter, stop right there. What sits before you is a loaf of coarse, brown bread so dense it could double as a building material. It's hard, cracked at the edges, and smells faintly of yeast and smoke. You pick it up and rap your knuckles against it. It knocks back like a door. Welcome to the peasant pantry. Your mother or someone acting as one, since half the village raises the other halves, sets down a wooden bowl. Inside, ale. Not the strong, joyful kind you'd get in a tavern, but small beer, a weak, watered-down brew with barely enough alcohol to sterilize the water. You take a sip. It's warm, slightly sour, but it keeps you from dying of dysentery. Historians still argue whether medieval beer was safer than water, but given the number of frogs and floating mysteries in the village, well, you're willing to take the risk. There's a sliver of cheese tiff, you can call it that. It's crumbly, grayish, and smells suspiciously like feet. You scrape off the green fuzz, shrug, and eat anyway. Hunger wins over pride. Sometimes there's porridge made from oats or barley, thick enough to stand a spoon upright, but not today. Someone burned yesterday's batch, and the smell still lingers like a curse. Outside, the sun's barely over the horizon. Smoke curls from the neighboring cottages, and you can hear someone already grinding grain on a hand, quern a sound halfway between a sigh and a groan. Every family mills just enough to survive, nothing more. The miller, on the other hand, takes a share from everyone's grain as payment. He's probably the only one around here who eats 3 meals a day. Maybe a snare, maybe the Lord's dovecote. Either way, it's a small miracle. Meat is a luxury, usually saved for holidays or funerals, sometimes both, depending on timing. You toss the bread crust into the stew pot hanging over the hearth. It's mostly yesterday's cabbage, with some onion and maybe a sliver of salted pork fat if fortune's smiling. The scent isn't pleasant, exactly, but it's warm, and warmth is half the battle. You sip the broth, feeling the salt sting your tongue. You swear it's the best thing you've ever tasted, which says a lot about your week so far. Here's a fun historical fact to chew on while you chew your bread. In many parts of medieval Europe, people ate roughly 2 meals a day. The first, called breakfast by monks but often skipped by peasants, came mid-morning. The second, the main meal, arrived at dusk. The idea of 3 square meals is centuries away. Food isn't about pleasure. It's about not fainting before noon. And yes, you drink beer at every meal because plain water is like playing digestive roulette. You step outside with your bowl, squinting against the early light. The smell of smoke and damp hay fills the air. A few neighbors wave. Everyone's got the same tired looks, sunken eyes, cracked hands, stooped backs. You nod to an old man sitting by the well. He grins, showing a handful of teeth that look more medieval than he does. "Good morning," he rasps. His breath could knock down a wall. You smile anyway, because politeness still exists even here. A rooster struts across the path, puffed up like he owns the place. He probably does. You take another sip of your ale, which tastes better the longer you drink it. Maybe your taste buds are giving up, or maybe you're just adapting. The human body is good at that. After all, it's been surviving this kind of misery for centuries. In the distance, the church bell tolls again. Time to get moving. But first, you glance toward the manor house. Smoke rises from its chimneys too, but the scent is different meat. Butter, fresh bread. The Lord and his family are dining on white loaves made from fine wheat flour, the kind your hands will never touch. They have honey, too, and maybe even imported spices if the trade routes are kind this year. You swallow hard, not from hunger, but from a sense of cosmic unfairness. Then you shrug it off. Complaining won't fill your stomach. You drain your bowl, lick the last drop of broth, and hand the wooden dish back. Someone wipes it with a cloth, no soap, no rinse. That cloth has seen more germs than a modern hospital, but it's the only one there is. You don't think about it too much. Thinking ruins meals. A dog noses around your feet, hopeful for scraps. You scratch its head, feeling its ribs under your fingers. You think about saving a crumb for it, but then your stomach growls, and you look away. Survival here is selfish by necessity. Kindness happens, sure, but only when it doesn't cost dinner. You stretch, feel the stiffness in your spine. Every muscle protests. It's barely breakfast, and you already miss the concept of lying down. But this is the rhythm of medieval life. Wake, eat, work, eat again. sleep, repeat. You can measure time by hunger. The woman from next door passes by carrying a basket of eggs. She stops to chat, mentions her husband's gone to the fields already. Her breath makes little clouds in the air. She laughs when you complain about the bread being hard. Then soak it in ale, she says. Like everyone else, you laugh too, because that's actually sound advice. You glance down at your bowl again, tracing the grooves in the wood. It's been passed down through generations. Tools, bowls, even clothing, they all outlive their owners. Nothing is wasted. Not because people are eco-conscious, but because poverty leaves no other choice. The stew from last night simmers quietly on the hearth again, thickening with every reheat. You're already planning tonight's meal without realizing it. Maybe you'll add a few foraged greens if the fields offer anything edible. Maybe, if you're lucky, someone caught a rabbit. You try not to get your hopes up. Here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval people sometimes used trenchers, which were old pieces of stale bread used as plates. After soaking up sauce and grease, the trenchers were eaten, fed to pigs, or given to beggars. Today's hard bread suddenly seems more versatile, doesn't it? You feel the first rumble of true hunger fade. It won't last long, but for the next hour or two, you have enough strength to keep going. The day stretches ahead like an endless road. Somewhere in that gray horizon is the hope of a hot supper war, at least a lukewarm one. The sound of distant laughter breaks the silence. Some kids are throwing clumps of mud at a wooden fence, pretending they're knights storming a castle. You smile, remembering that imagination costs nothing. Maybe you did the same thing at their age, before you learned that castles are for other people. A rooster crows again. The smell of cooking drifts from another hut. Someone managed to scrounge bacon. The lucky devil. You can practically taste it in the air. You think about the monks up at the abbey, who probably have gardens full of herbs and kitchens stocked with fish and bread. It's ironic poverty was supposed to be holy, but the church eats better than anyone else around here. Historians still argue whether that was hypocrisy or just practicality. You finish the last sip of ale, set the bowl down, and wipe your mouth with your sleeve. The wind picks up, tugging at your hair. Somewhere, the blacksmith's hammer starts ringing again, the sound bouncing through the village like a heartbeat. Breakfast is over. The world doesn't wait for anyone to digest. You stand, stretch once more, and take a deep breath of cold morning air. The smell of manure, smoke, and damp earth mixes together into something strangely comforting. It's the smell of survival. You might not love it, but it's yours. Your mother calls your name time to head to the fields. You nod, grab your cloak, and step into the mud. The bread still sits heavy in your stomach, but it's fuel enough for the day. You look down the long, muddy path ahead, and for a moment, you imagine you're walking toward something better. But then, reality sets in. This is breakfast in the Middle Ages. It's rough, it's real, and it's only the beginning. The morning mist clings to your boots as you trudge toward the fields. The world is gray and silent except for the rhythmic creak of the cartwheels and the dull thud of your own steps in the mud. The ground is soft, heavy with dew, and each step feels like it wants to swallow you whole. Your breath hangs in the air, small clouds that disappear too quickly. Ahead of you, rows of thin figures move through the Hasur neighbors, already bent over, already working. There's no time to chat, no time to stretch. The sun has barely risen, but the workday started long before it. You reach your plot, a narrow strip of land that barely belongs to you. Technically, it belongs to the Lord. You just rent it with your life. The soil is uneven, full of stones and roots that bite back against your hoe. You take a deep breath, grip the wooden handle, and start digging. The wood is rough and splintered. Your hands are already raw from the week before, but gloves are a luxury you've never even seen. The earth gives reluctantly. Each swing of the hoe sends vibrations up your arm. The muscles in your shoulders start to burn, but stopping isn't an option. The bell from the church rings faintly again in the distance. Its echo doesn't bring comfort, just a reminder that God is watching. And so is the bailiff. "Keep moving," shouts a voice. You glance up. It's the reeve, the village's middleman between peasants and lord. He's got a stick in his hand and a look that says he enjoys his job just a little too much. You nod, pretending to pick up the pace. It's not worth making him angry. You've seen what happens when someone argues. The stocks, the fines, the humiliation. Justice here has a way of finding whoever's most tired. By mid-morning, your back screams, your fingers ache, and your stomach is already growling again. You wipe your forehead with your sleeve, smearing dirt across your face. You look down the line of workers and see everyone doing the same, bending, lifting, sweating, cursing quietly under their breath. It's a strange kind of harmony, like a grim orchestra made of pain and persistence. You pause for a moment and glance at the horizon. The manor house glints faintly in the distance, its windows catching the light. You wonder what the Lord is doing right now? Maybe eating his second breakfast. Maybe deciding how much tax to raise next year. You shake the thought away and drive your hoe into the soil again. Envy doesn't plow fields. A small boy runs past carrying a basket of tools almost as big as he is. His bare feet slap against the mud. He grins at you as he passes meat in 2 teeth, but full of life. You almost envy that too. Children start working as soon as they can walk straight. There's no childhood here. Not really. Just a smaller version of adulthood with slightly shorter chores. You lean on your hoe for a moment, catching your breath. The air smells like damp earth and smoke. It's oddly satisfying, in a brutal kind of way. You can see what your hands accomplish. Each row turned, each seed planted its proof that you exist. In a world where people vanish from sickness, hunger, or war, that's something. Here's a mainstream historical fact to ground you. Medieval peasants typically worked 6 days a week, from sunrise to sunset. Sundays were for church, not rest. Depending on the season, you'd plant in spring, weed and harvest in summer, and repair everything that broke in between. There were no vacations, no pensions, and no sick days. If you couldn't work, you didn't eat. Simple math. As you keep digging, a sound cuts through the steady rhythm of tools and breathing music. You glance up. One of the younger men is humming, a slow tune, maybe a folk song passed down for generations. Soon, another voice joins, then another. The melody drifts across the field, thin but beautiful. It doesn't make the work easier, but it makes it bearable. For a few minutes, you forget how much your arms hurt. By noon, the sun has burned away the mist, revealing every wrinkle of the land. You straighten your back, squinting against the light. Your tunic is soaked with sweat despite the chill. You kneel to sip from a leather flask. The water inside tastes faintly of animal hide, but it's cool, and that's enough. Lunch isn't a meal, let's a pause. You pull a crust of bread from your pouch, chew it slowly, and share a few crumbs with the boy who's sitting beside you. He grins again, eyes shining like he just got away with something. A crow caws overhead, and you look up at the sky. It's endless and pale, a reminder that time stretches on no matter how much dirt you move. The rhythm of work resumes. Sound of metal hitting earth echoes across the field like a heartbeat. Then something unexpected, a scream. Not the kind of playful shout you hear from children, but a sharp, startled cry. Everyone stops. You see a man clutching his hand, blood running down his wrist where the blade of his scythe slipped. He stumbles, pale, shaking. The reeve rushes over, shouting something about carelessness. Someone tears a strip from their tunic and ties it around the wound. The man winces, muttering prayers through clenched teeth. Work resumes a few minutes later, because it has to. There's no doctor coming. It's a brutal truth. Accidents like that happen all the time. A broken hand, a cut foot, a fever could end a life. Medieval people didn't think much about retirement because no one made it that far. Life expectancy hovered somewhere in the 30s, though that's skewed by infant deaths. If you survive childhood, you might live to 50 if you were lucky, careful, and occasionally blessed by whatever saint handled blisters. You shift your weight, feeling the ache return. Your mind drifts while your hands keep working. You think about winter, how the fields freeze, how hunger grows sharper than any tool. You think about the stories your grandmother told, of years when the crops failed and people boiled grass just to have something to swallow. You glance down at the dirt, suddenly grateful for every stubborn root that still grows here. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some medieval farmers believed certain prayers or charms could help crops grow. They'd bury small crosses at the corners of fields or whisper blessings into the soil. You've seen people do it yourself. Maybe it works. Maybe it just feels like hope in a world where nature doesn't care what you want. By afternoon, your body has gone numb in all the right places. The pain becomes background noise, like the wind or the flies buzzing around your ears. You find yourself in a strange rhythm. Breathe, lift, strike, move. It's hypnotic. Maybe that's how people survive this. Not through strength, but through surrender. A cloud passes over the sun and the temperature drops. You shiver, pulling your cloak tighter. The sky threatens rain. You glance toward the village, wondering if you'll make it home before the storm hits. Spoiler, you won't. Thunder rumbles, distant but growing. The reeve yells for everyone to finish the last row. The clouds darken fast, swallowing the horizon. By the time you sling your tools over your shoulder, fat drops of rain are already spattering your face. The earth turns slick, the mud sucking at your feet as you trudge back. Your clothes cling to your skin. The path floods within minutes. You can't help it to laugh. A short, tired laugh, but real. The absurdity of working from dawn to dusk, only to be drenched on the walk home, feels like the punchline to some medieval joke no one remembers. You glance at the others, and a few of them are laughing too. Misery loves company, even when it's knee-deep in mud. By the time you reach the village, you're soaked to the bone. The smoke from the chimneys rises lazily, blurred by rain. You step inside your hut and feel instant relief. Warmth, fire, the smell of wet wool. Someone hands you a cup of thin ale. You drink it down without a word. Outside, the rain keeps hammering the roof. The sound is steady, almost soothing. You sit near the fire, staring into the flames. Your hands are cracked, your back stiff, your stomach hollow again already. But you're alive. That counts for something. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were miserable or content, and honestly, both might be true. You don't know any other way to live. You don't dream of luxury, just of rest, of a dry bed, a full belly, and maybe a summer without blight. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the fire soak into your bones. Tomorrow, the same fields will wait. But for now, you have earned a few quiet minutes in the dark. You push open the crooked wooden door of your hut, and the air inside greets you like a damp rag to the face. It's smoky, musky, and somehow both too warm and too cold. You'd think with all that open space between the planks, air would move freely, but no. It just traps the smoke from the small central fire that doubles as your stove, heater, and accidental eye irritant. You cough, wave the haze away, and squint through it toward the corner where a chicken has made herself very comfortable in the straw you call a floor. This is home. If home means a single-room hut where the walls lean like tired old men, and the thatched roof leaks whenever the wind so much as sneezes. Still, it's your space, and after a day hacking at the fields or hauling buckets, you'd take it over the cold rain outside. You duck under the low lintel, trying not to smack your head for the 50th time, and kick off your boots or what's left of them. They're stiff with mud, cracked from years of use, and smell like something small died inside. Your wife's or husband, depending on who you are in this little journey, stirs the pot hanging over the hearth. The smell is earthy, maybe cabbage or onions. Maybe both, if luck's on your side. It's supper, or at least the medieval attempt at it. You watch as a trickle of smoke escapes through the hole in the roof, which doubles as your ventilation system and your skylight. On windy nights, it's also your indoor rain feature. You sit on a three-legged stool, worn smooth from years of weary behinds. The walls are plastered with a mixture of mud, straw, and something you try not to think about. Historians still argue whether the addition of animal dung in medieval wall plaster was for strength, insulation, or just convenience. But either way, you're living inside it. You run your fingers along the uneven surface, feeling where the plaster crumbles slightly. A spider scurries away. You let it go. You've killed enough things today. Cross the room, meaning about 4 steps away the family bed, squats like a straw-filled trench. Everyone shares it. Parents, children, maybe even a stray cousin who's fallen on hard times. Privacy is a word no one's invented yet. You roll your shoulders, aching from work, and imagine a world where people sleep alone, under clean sheets with a blanket that isn't half burlap. Then again, that's a kind of luxury that would sound insane here. The baby wails. Someone shushes him. The goat bleats in the corner, unimpressed by your attempts at domestic peace. You glance up at the smoke-darkened rafters where herbs hang to dry sage. Thyme and yarrow, meant to ward off both disease and evil spirits. It's unclear which they're more effective against. A little charm dangles beside them, a small carved figure meant to protect the home. Whether it actually does is another matter. The fire crackles, the stew bubbles. You tear off a chunk of yesterday's bread and dunk it, softening it just enough to chew without dislocating your jaw. You chew slowly, tasting smoke and salt. Your mind drifts as your muscles relax for the first time all day. A sudden knock, or maybe just a fist pounding wood. You jolt upright. Visitors aren't common at night. It's your neighbor, a broad man with a beard that looks like it could hide a small bird. He steps inside without waiting for permission. Doors aren't locks so much as suggestions. He's here to trade a hunk of cured meat for some spare wool you've been saving. You nod, shake on it, and watch as he leaves again, disappearing into the dark mist outside. Be thankful you've got a roof at all, you mutter to yourself. Many peasants didn't. Some lived in hovels, dug partly into the ground earth houses, where the walls were literally the surrounding soil. Quirky, yes, but not exactly ideal when it rained. Archaeologists have found traces of those homes across northern Europe, sometimes with animal bones mixed into the floor layers, suggesting that livestock shared the same cramped quarters. The warmth was mutual, if not exactly pleasant. You lean back, gaze at the ceiling, and think about how the nobles live. Stone walls, colorful tapestries, roaring fireplaces big enough to roast a whole ox. Of course, they also have drafts that could freeze your soul, and rats the size of cats scurrying through their grain stores. Not much comfort even at the top. You wonder if they ever look down from their castle windows and imagine how peasants like you live. Probably not. You're more statistic than person to them, another body to till their soil. A gust of wind shoves the door open, scattering ash across the floor. The youngest child squeaks and hides under the blanket. You mutter a curse, mild by medieval standards, shove the door closed again, bracing it with a wooden bar. You make a mental note to patch the gap tomorrow, though you probably won't. There's always something else demanding your time. Dinner finishes, or at least the pot's empty. You lick the last bit of broth from your wooden spoon and set it aside. Washing dishes isn't a concept yet. You'll just rinse it in the nearest bucket. Water is precious and often filthy anyway. Historians still argue whether people in rural Europe truly drank water at all, or if they survived entirely on ale. Judging by the smell of the buckets, ale might have been the safer bet. The fire dims to glowing embers. The family begins to settle. You strip off your outer tunic and hang it near the hearth to dry. The damp smell of wool fills the room. Beneath it, your linen shirt clings to you, still streaked with mud and sweat. Laundry happens maybe once a week if there's water, soap, and energy left over, which there rarely is. You crawl into bed, the straw rustling beneath you. It pokes through the thin linen sheet, pricking your skin. Somewhere inside that mattress, something tiny moves, probably a flea. You scratch absent-mindedly. Tomorrow, you'll wake with fresh bites, like tiny medieval souvenirs. Outside, a dog howls. Maybe a wolf answers. The night is deep and silent, except for the low crackle of the fire and the rhythmic breathing of your family beside you. You stare into the shadows. The thatch above sways slightly, whispering in the wind. It's peaceful in its rough, dirty way. You think back to the daylight, the fields, the mud, the sweat, the rhythm of it all. There's a strange comfort in knowing tomorrow will be exactly the same. You don't have much, but you have routine, and routine is what keeps people alive here. Then, a soft drip on your forehead. Another, you sigh. The roof's leaking again. You shift over an inch, tuck the blanket around your shoulders, and close your eyes anyway. Maybe the leak will find someone else tonight. The scent of smoke clings to everything: your hair, your clothes, even your dreams. It's said that medieval homes reeked so strongly of smoke that travelers could smell them before they saw them. That's probably true, but to you, it's just home. The smell of survival. As sleep creeps in, your thoughts fade to fragments. The warmth of the hearth, the rough straw under your cheek, the sound of a distant owl. You wonder how people centuries from now will live if they'll have roofs that never leak or beds that never itch. You smile faintly at the thought, then drift into darkness, the firelight painting slow, flickering patterns on the walls. Morning again, though time feels slippery here, marked not by clocks, but by roosters. Aching backs, and the thin light seeping through smoke-stained gaps in the wall. You stretch beneath your straw blanket and immediately regret it. Every joint protests like an angry choir. The fire has gone cold, the air damp and heavy. You sit up and wrap your cloak around yourself, a rough wool thing that's somehow both too scratchy and too thin. Welcome to medieval fashion wear. Comfort is a foreign concept, and style means you're not freezing to death yet. You pull on your tunic. Its once brown color faded into a shade best described as questionable. It smells faintly of sweat, smoke, and sheep, the holy trinity of the Middle Ages. The fabric scratches your skin like sandpaper. The truth is, most people never owned more than 2 or 3 sets of clothes, and washing them too often risked wearing them out. So, you make do. Your undershirt is linen, if you're lucky. If you're not, it's coarse hemp, and you itch constantly. Historians still argue whether peasants actually wore undergarments at all. Some say yes, others think they went commando under those tunics. Either way, the breeze finds its way in. You tie a rope around your waist as a belt because actual belts are for people who can afford leather and glance at your shoes. They've seen better centuries. They're little more than stitched scraps of hide, stiff from mud and time. You slip them on, toes immediately squishing into the damp interior. You mutter something that's probably not church-approved. Your reflection in the pot's dull metal tells no lies. Hair greasy and matted. Skin browned by wind and grime, and a beard or stray wisps. If you're not the beard type, you haven't seen clean since spring. Soap exists, sure, but it's made from animal fat and ash, and it's about as gentle as scrubbing yourself with gravel. A quick splash of cold water will have to do. You dip your hands in the bucket, splash your face, and gasp as the icy shock hits you like divine punishment. Bathing, after all, is a luxury. You glance over at your spouse, who's pulling on their own clothes, layers of wool and linen, tied and pinned in place with small bone fasteners. There's no zipper, no buttons, no Velcro. It's just faith, friction, and an endless supply of string. You help lace the back of their kirtle or tunic, fingers fumbling with the stiff fabric. You both smell faintly of smoke and hay, but that's normal. Everyone does. You'd stand out more if you didn't. The kids are already awake, chasing each other around the hut in their long shirts. Children's clothes are usually just mini versions of adults, and when they outgrow them, the garments get cut down, patched, or handed to someone smaller. Nothing goes to waste here. A tear in a sleeve isn't a flautist history. Before you step outside, you grab your cloak. It's heavy and smells faintly of wet sheep because that's what it is, wool, straight from a sheep. Roughly woven, oiled, and barely processed. Ow. Water slides off it like it does off the animal itself, which is convenient because rain is basically your roommate. You drape it over your shoulders and secure it with a wooden pin. It's less fashion statement, more survival blanket. You glance at your neighbors as you head toward the common path. Everyone looks the same: muted colors, rough fabrics, practical layers. There's no bright dye here, except maybe a rare stripe of faded blue or green, earned only if someone managed to get their hands on woad or onion skin dye. Forget about royal purples or deep crimsons. Those shades belong to people whose hands never touch soil. A little further down the road, you pass a traveling peddler, his cart piled with bits of cloth, ribbons, and trinkets. He calls out in a sing-song voice, promising bright cloth, fair prices. You pause, tempted by a small square of colored fabric, but even a scrap costs more than a week's wages. You smile, shake your head, and move on. The peddler shrugs. He knows the look of peasants who only come to dream. Fashion in medieval times isn't about choice, it's about survival. Clothes are tools, not statements. You wear wool because it keeps you warm even when wet, linen because it breathes in summer, and layers because the wind is always one bad mood away from biting through your skin. Still, there's a strange dignity in it. Every stitch tells a story. Every patch is proof that you've endured. You walk to the well to fetch water, the bucket's rope biting into your palm. A few other villagers are there too, gossiping as they wait their turn. One woman mentions that her cousin saw a noblewoman once her gown so long it dragged through the mud. You all laugh. Nobles don't walk. They glide, carried by servants, wrapped in silks they can barely breathe in. You try to imagine yourself in something like that: a gown with sleeves so wide you could hide a chicken in them, or a doublet so tight it'd take a servant to help you exhale. No, thank you. You'll take your wool any day. Someone mentions a new fashion from the city's: pointed shoes so long they have to be tied up at the knees. You snort into your bucket. Ain't no way those help with plowing, you mutter. The others chuckle. Quirky, yes, but not for you. Historians still argue whether those ridiculous shoes, called poulaines, were meant as status symbols or jokes gone too far. Either way, you know they'd last about 5 minutes in your muddy lane. Back home, you hang your cloak near the hearth to dry and inspect your clothing repairs for the week. The needle is bone, the thread pulled from old linen. You sit by the dim light, pushing the needle through thick cloth, muttering as it pricks your finger for the 100th time. You suck the bead of blood and keep going. If you don't mend it now, you'll have nothing to wear when the frost comes. Every hole patched is a small victory over the world's wear and tear. You can almost hear your neighbors through the thin walls: one family arguing over a torn tunic, another singing softly while darning socks. The rhythm of thread through cloth, the quiet hiss of the fire, the smell of woolfis is the sound of survival. You hum along, off-key, but content, because here, everyone's a tailor by necessity. At the back of your mind, though, curiosity lingers. You've heard tales of the royal court: how the nobles perfume themselves to hide their lack of bathing, how their gowns shimmer like water under torchlight. But you also hear how they faint from the weight of their finery, or catch fire from standing too close to candles. Maybe luxury isn't as glamorous as it sounds. A little soot seems a small price to pay for mobility. As the sun dips low, the temperature drops sharply. You wrap yourself tighter, the rough wool scratching your chin. The smell of evening stew seeps through the cracks: a guinean, turnip, and something vaguely meaty. You sit near the fire, picking straw from your cloak, and sigh. Life is hard, but there's a strange peace in knowing your clothes can withstand it. You glance down at your boots again. They're cracked open at the sides, but you'll patch them tomorrow with strips of leather salvaged from an old bag. A friend once told you that medieval shoes have soles and, judging by how yours have survived through mud, rain, and manure, you believe it. Quirky, but true. The fire flickers. You stretch your legs, wincing as the day's cold leaves your bones. You think about how people in the future might see these clothes displayed in glass cases, labeled with neat little signs, peasant tunic, 14th century. They'll look soft, harmless. No one will smell the smoke woven into every fiber or feel the sting of the wool on bare skin. No one will know how the thread bit your fingers raw, but you will. You'll lie down later, the fabric still clinging to your skin, and you'll remember that each piece you wear has earned its place on your back. And maybe, in that quiet, smoky dark, you'll feel a small, stubborn pride, because in a world built to grind you down, your clothes have kept you standing. You wake before dawn again, the air colder than yesterday, your breath fogging as you pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders. The church bell tolls faintly in the distance, a hollow sound carried through the mist. You can't see it from here, but you know the steeple is there pointing toward heaven like a finger reminding everyone below where they stand. Faith isn't just a part of life here. It's the air itself. You breathe it, fear it, and sometimes choke on it. You cross yourself automatically because that's what people do. Whether you feel it or not doesn't matter. Belief isn't optional in this world. The church is everywhere. In your thoughts, your taxes, your calendar, and your conscience. Even the way you mark time before sunrise, after Mass, before Vespers is soaked in religion. You pull on your tunic and step outside. The village is just waking up, smoke curling from chimneys. Crows perched on the roof of the chapel. The priest's house sits a little higher up the hill, because of course it does. He's the one person here who can read, who holds the keys to salvation or, at least claims to. You nod respectfully as he passes, robes clean, eyes stern. You try to avoid eye contact. If he asks whether you've confessed lately, you'll have to lie, which, ironically, would require another confession. Medieval life is a loop of sin and apology. A neighbor whispers that old Agnes has been acting strange again, talking to herself, collecting herbs at night. You glance toward her cottage at the edge of the woods. The roof sags, the walls are lined with bunches of drying plants, and a black cat sits in the window, tail twitching. She's the village midwife and healer, the one people run to when babies won't come or fevers won't break. But she's also the one they whisper about when storms roll in or crops fail. Faith, here, walks hand in hand with fear. You think about stopping by for a tonic, your back's been aching from the fields, but hesitate. You remember last year when the priest warned the congregation that those who dabble in unnatural remedies consort with dark forces. Of course, he said that right after taking Agnes's honey for his sore throat. Everyone laughed politely, pretending not to notice the irony. Historians still argue whether the church's grip was born of devotion or control, but either way, it worked. You tie the tenth of your grain to them, attend Mass every Sunday, and repeat prayers you barely understand. Latin rolls from the priest's mouth like a spell, and you nod along, half in awe, half in confusion. The language of heaven, apparently, doesn't need to make sense to the people below. Inside the chapel, the air smells of wax, wood, and dust. Candles flicker, casting long shadows across the worn stone floor. You kneel, murmuring the familiar phrases, though your mind drifts elsewhere to your fields, your family, the ache in your knees. Still, you bow your head when the priest lifts the chalice. Everyone does. Faith is safety. Doubt is dangerous. After Mass, you linger outside with the others. The gossip flows as freely as the holy water. Someone claims to have seen a strange light over the forest last night. A bad omen, says one. A sign of angels, says another. No one can agree, but everyone believes. That's how it goes. As you walk home, you pass a wooden cross by the road, marking the spot where lightning struck last summer. Someone's hung a rosary from it, hoping to keep more storms away. Superstition and religion blur together here, like smoke and fog. You remember when your own grandmother used to hang charms made of bread dough in the rafters to feed the house. Spirits. The priest scolded her, of course. But when the barn didn't burn down that winter, even he stopped mentioning it. You arrive home to find your spouse whispering a prayer over the stew. Not because it's special, but because everything here requires blessing food, travel, childbirth, even the outhouse. You mumble an amen and take your bowl. As you eat, your eyes drift to the small wooden cross above the hearth, darkened by years of smoke. You carved it yourself, not because you were told to, but because it feels wrong not to. Faith, even in its simplest form, is a kind of armor. Still, you've seen how that same faith can turn sharp. When a cow falls ill, when a baby dies, when the harvest fails, someone must be to blame. Maybe a witch. Maybe a witch. Maybe the sinner who skipped confession. Maybe even you. The line between devotion and accusation is paper thin. Last winter, they burned a woman in the next village. You didn't go, but you heard about it for weeks, how she confessed under pressure, how her ashes were scattered so her spirit couldn't return. Some said she made a pact with the devil. Others said she just made too many enemies. Historians still argue whether those confessions were genuine belief or the product of fear. But you've stopped wondering. In a world where the unknown is constant, fear fills the gaps that reason can't. Later that night, you visit Agnes anyway. You tell yourself it's just for a remedy your back, your sleep, your aching hands. But when she opens the door, candlelight spilling across her lined face, you feel that old shiver of unease. Her eyes are sharp, clever, to knowing. Her hut smells of herbs and smoke, sweeter than yours, thicker somehow. Dried lavender hangs from the beams. Jars filled with strange liquids line the shelf. You can't tell if it feels holy or haunted. She takes your hand, presses her thumb into your palm, and mutters something under her breath. You work too much, she says. You almost laugh. Everyone works too much. But you nod anyway. She hands you a pouch of dried leaves. Boil these in water, she says. Don't tell the priest. You promise, slip her a few coins, and leave. The night air outside is sharp. You look up, and for once, the sky is clear, an ocean of stars spread above the thatch rooftops. For a brief moment, the world feels vast and calm. You wonder if faith is supposed to feel like this. Not fear or obedience, but awe. Maybe that's what it once was, before men built walls around it. Back home, you toss a pinch of the herbs into hot water. The scent fills the hut, earthy, strange, soothing. You take a sip. Maybe it's real medicine. Maybe it's just comfort. Either way, it works. You glance at the crucifix again, then at the window where the moonlight spills in. You whisper a small, private prayer, not one the priest taught you, but your own. Something about peace or safety, or maybe just a day without pain. Faith, fear, superstition, they're all threads in the same tapestry. The church gives you meaning. The herbs give you hope. The stories give you something to hold on to when the night stretches too long. And in a world where so much is uncertain, that's enough. You lie down, the warmth from the cup spreading through you. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots, and the wind hums softly against the roof. You think about angels and demons, saints and sinners, miracles and madness. Then you let it all fade. You close your eyes, cross yourself one last time, and drift into sleep, knowing that tomorrow you'll wake again beneath the same smoky roof, still believing, because not believing here is the one sin no one survives. You wake in the gray light of dawn, body heavy, throat rough. It starts with a cough, deep and rattling. You tell yourself it's just the chill, just another damp morning in your smoke-filled hut, but by midday, the fever has you sweating through your tunic. You lie back on the straw bed, dizzy, watching the ceiling beams blur and swim. The world outside keeps moving, chickens clucking, children shouting "but" for you. The sounds drift through a fog. Being sick in medieval times isn't just miserable, it's dangerous. There are no doctors here, not really. It's just a handful of people who know a little, believe a lot, and guess the rest. Your spouse frowns, laying a hand on your forehead. You're burning up, they say, which is obvious. They mutter a prayer under their breath, just in case, and call for Agnes, the village healer. You hear her name through the haze and groan. The priest won't like that. But fever doesn't wait for permission. Agnes arrives as the afternoon light fades, a bundle of herbs swinging from her belt and a knowing look in her eye. You again, she says softly, setting her things down. You manage a weak grin. She dips a cloth in cool water and wipes your brow. The relief is immediate but fleeting. The air smells of thyme, vinegar, and wood smoke. You breathe it in, hoping it'll chase the sickness out. She starts murmuring as she works, her voice low and rhythmic, half prayer, half incantation. You're not sure which god she's talking to, and you're too tired to ask. She mixes a paste from crushed garlic and honey, presses it to your chest, and wraps it with cloth. This'll draw the bad humors out, she says. You nod because arguing would take too much effort. That's how medicine works here. Equal parts faith, fear, and folklore. Historians still argue whether the medieval four humors theory, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile was based on science or wishful thinking. But it shaped every diagnosis. Too hot, you've got too much blood. Too pale, too much phlegm. There's a cure for everything, though it might kill you faster than the illness. You hear a story about a noble who once paid a barber surgeon to bleed him for headaches. The poor man fainted before feeling better, mostly because he lost half his blood. Still, that same logic trickles down here in the villages. People believe sickness is imbalance, so they do whatever they can to rebalance. Some drink bitter brews, others swallow ashes or wear charms filled with crushed gemstones. You're just trying not to die of garlic fumes. Agnes hums softly while stirring another concoction. This one a dark, thick liquid that smells faintly of vinegar and smoke. Drink, she says. You hesitate. Looks like something scraped off the bottom of a cauldron. But she raises an eyebrow, and you remember she's outlived most of the village. So, you drink. It burns your throat, makes your eyes water, and tastes like old socks left in a puddle. It's working, she says. You're not sure if she means the medicine or your gag reflex. She wraps a sprig of rosemary in cloth and ties it around your neck. Keeps away evil spirits, she explains. You've heard worse ideas. A neighbor once hung a dead frog from his door to ward off the plague. Didn't help much. But at least this one smells nice. As the night wears on, the fever grips harder. You drift in and out of half-dreams, faces floating above you. The whisper of Latin prayers, the hiss of the fire. You think you see the priest at one point, standing in the doorway, watching with disapproval. Maybe he's real, maybe not. You hear him muttering something about sorcery and the will of God. Agnes ignores him, keeps working. Faith doesn't boil water, she mutters. That makes you smile faintly before sleep swallows you again. When you wake, it's morning again. Your fever has broken, though your body feels hollow, as if the sickness burned through everything inside you. Agnes is gone, leaving only a few herbs on the table and a note scratched into a piece of bark. Rest, drink water, stay alive. You manage a weak laugh. In a world where even clean water can kill you, that last instruction feels oddly optimistic. You try to stand, legs trembling. Every movement sends pain crawling through your bones. Outside, the air smells of wet earth and ash. You breathe it in, grateful to still be breathing at all. The villagers nod when they see you, whispering about your recovery. One calls it a miracle. Another says it's proof Agnes is blessed or cursed. Depends who you ask. Later, you hear a story from the next village over. A healer there was accused of witchcraft after curing a noble's fever when the priest's prayers failed. They said she must have made a deal with the devil, because no woman should have such power. They tied her to a chair and threw her into the river. If she floated, she was a witch. If she sank, she was innocent. She sank. You sit quietly for a long time after hearing that, staring at your mug of ale. Healing, it seems, can be a deadly profession. You walk to the edge of the village that evening to where the herbs grow wild. The air hums with insects, the sun bleeding gold over the horizon. You pick a few sprigs of sage and tuck them into your pouch. Not because you're sick now, but because you've learned that in this world, it's never a bad idea to be prepared. A soft breeze rustles through the trees, carrying the scent of soil and wood smoke. You remember how it felt last night, lying in that fever dream, your body breaking apart, your mind floating. You wonder if that's what dying feels like, fading into mist. Historians still argue whether most peasants truly understood their illnesses or simply accepted them as fate. You think it's both. When every winter could be your last, you stop asking why and start praying it isn't. As you head home, you pass the church again. The priest is outside, nodding stiffly as you walk by. God spared you, he says. You nod back, biting your tongue. You don't tell him it was Agnes, not God, who cooled your fever and made you that wretched tea. Some truths aren't worth sharing. Back inside, you sit by the fire, feeling the rough wool of your cloak against your skin. The hut smells faintly of rosemary and smoke. You watch the flames flicker and think about how fragile it all is: life, health, belief. One moment you're alive and laughing. The next, you're gasping for air, begging for mercy from gods or herbs, or both. You take another sip of water, boiled this time, and lean back. Your spouse hums softly beside you, a lullaby that's older than memory. You close your eyes. Your chest still aches, but the air moves easier now. You think of Agnes, of her clever hands and sharp eyes, and hope she's safe. Then your mind drifts to others, those who never woke from their fevers, whose names are already fading. The world doesn't stop for the sick. The fields still need tending, the fires still need wood. Even grief here must make room for chores. The night deepens. The fire crackles softly, the smoke curling toward the rafters. You wrap the blanket tighter around you and sigh, feeling the last of the fever leave your body. The world outside keeps turning cold, cruel, but strangely steady. You glance once more at the herbs drying by the hearth. Maybe they're magic. Maybe they're medicine. Maybe they're both. You smile faintly at the thought, close your eyes, and let sleep take you again, this time without fear. The cough never quite leaves you. It lingers, soft but persistent, like a ghost of the fever that nearly took you. You learn to live with it, just as you learn to live with hunger, cold, and the constant ache in your knees. Because in this world, the body isn't a temple, it's a battlefield, constantly under siege. Every day you rise, stretch, and feel the small cracks and pops that remind you just how mortal you are. You trudge to the fields again, breath fogging in the morning air. The harvest is near, and there's no rest for anyone. The crops are the village's lifeline. Every stalk of wheat, every turnip pulled from the earth is another week of survival. The rhythm of work keeps everyone moving, even when bones protest and fingers stiffen. You lean on your hoe, glance toward the horizon, and wonder how many winters your back has left in it. Midday comes, and you take a break by the hedgerow. Someone passes you a crust of bread and a sip of ale. You chew slowly, tasting dust and effort more than flavor. You laugh weakly when your neighbor Godric says the bread's so hard it could double as a weapon. At least it won't go stale, you reply, and he grins through cracked lips. Quirky, yes, but that humor is how you survive teeny sparks in a world made mostly of mud. The fields stretch out like a patchwork quilt of gold and green, But the work is far from easy. Plowing is a back-breaking task, even with an ox or two pulling the wooden plow. You push and guide, muscles trembling, sweat mixing with the mud that sticks to your boots. Historians still argue whether peasants actually plowed as deeply as sources suggest, or if much of the writing glorifies labor for moral lessons. Either way, it doesn't feel glorified when your shoulders scream with effort. By afternoon, the sun burns through the mist. You pause, wipe the sweat from your brow, and catch the smell of manure carried on the breeze. Fertilizing fields is an unpleasant but vital task. You grimace at the thought of hauling it in buckets from the stable, but survival demands it. Some days, you wonder if the smell is worth the yield or if everyone just learns to ignore it. You do. The nose adapts faster than the body. Nearby, children chase each other across the furrows, laughing and shrieking. Their joy is unfiltered, raw, and startling against the backdrop of toil. You smile, remembering when you were that age, running through the same fields, thinking that life was bigger than labor. It isn't. It's just longer. You pass the village smithy, where sparks fly from hammer to anvil. The rhythmic clang rings through the air, a constant reminder that someone's body is being shaped into utility, not beauty. You glance inside and see the blacksmith sweating, muscles bulging, eyes narrowing with effort. Even a skilled hand cannot avoid the aches that follow a day at the forge. Quirky fact: some smiths claim that wearing iron bracelets help them channel energy. Though scholars still argue whether this was superstition or an early form of ergonomic thinking. As evening descends, the work isn't done. You haul water, tend to animals, and patch a fence broken by wind or mischief. Every task overlaps another. There is no true pause, no perfect moment to catch your breath. The weight of survival presses on your shoulders, heavier than any stone or plow. You remember your bed at home, the straw, the smoke-stained walls, and long for the moment when your head will finally sink into it. Dinner is modest, a thin stew of barley and root vegetables, maybe a scrap of meat if luck allows. You chew thoughtfully, counting calories more than savoring taste. The family murmurs quietly, tired from a day of endless labor. The fire crackles in the corner, smoke curling toward the ceiling beams. You breathe in deep, letting the aroma fill your lungs, a small comfort amid constant exhaustion. You glance at the window, watching the moon rise. Its light casts silver patterns on the mud brick walls. Outside, the wind moves through the trees, carrying the scent of wet earth and the faint, lingering odors of livestock. You think about disease, hunger, frost, and storm, all waiting just beyond the village edge. Life is fragile, precarious, yet astonishingly persistent. You lay down on the straw bed that night, muscles screaming from the day's labor. The cough is quieter now, but your chest aches with the memory of fever. You close your eyes, listening to the household settle around you, the soft breathing of children, the scrape of a stool as someone stirs, the faint pop of the dying fire. Even in exhaustion, there's a rhythm to it, all a pulse that threads through labor, survival, and fleeting moments of laughter. You remember the lessons learned in pain, that even the smallest tasks sustain life, that humor is a shield, and that endurance is both a necessity and an art form. Sleep comes slowly, but when it does, it is deep, dreamless, and precious. Dawn spills over the village again, but today it feels heavier, slower, almost reluctant. You rise from the straw bed, joints stiff, body weary from days of toil, fever, and the lingering aches that seem permanent now. The fire has burned low overnight, leaving the hut smelling of smoke, ash, and yesterday's stew. You stretch, wincing, and pull on your tunic, feeling the scratch of wool against your skin. In medieval life, comfort is a luxury. You've long learned to accept mild torment as normal. You step outside, the earth damp beneath your boots, mud caking the soles. The morning air is sharp, filled with mist and the smell of wet animals. Chickens cluck, goats bleat, and somewhere, A dog barks, probably at nothing, probably at everything. You shiver and hug yourself, thinking about the day ahead, the fields, the chores, the endless rotation of labor that marks life here. There is no concept of the weekend, no holidays to pause and breathe. Every day blends into the next, each as relentless as the last. The neighbors are already at work. Old Tomas leans on his plow, swearing at the stubborn earth. You nod to him, though you know he won't hear. The rhythm of plowing, planting, and harvesting isolates each worker in their own toil. You make your way to the stable, checking the animals. Horses, cows, goats, pigs all require feeding, milking, cleaning, and care. Miss one task, and the repercussions ripple through the village's fragile ecosystem. One sick animal can mean weeks of lost food, extra labor, and more stress. Quirky but true. Medieval farmers sometimes used animal droppings as both fertilizer and a medicinal ingredient for themselves. Though historians still argue whether this was science or desperation. You've seen it happen smelling the manure, grinding it into mud, and thinking, yes, this is probably going to work. By midday, sweat drips down your neck. The sun is bright, but it does little to warm the damp chill that penetrates every fiber of your clothing. You pause by the well, lowering the bucket with a rope frayed from years of use. The water smells earthy, but clean enough to drink, a precious commodity in this world. You sip and let the liquid slide down your throat, grateful for something simple, something that won't make you sicker. Even the cleanest water can harbor disease in the Middle Ages, so every gulp is a gamble. You wander toward the village center, passing the church where the priest tends to morning duties. His robes shine white and clean, a stark contrast to the mud and grime that covers everyone else. You think about how he never tilts a shovel, never hauls a bucket of water, yet commands respect and fear. Power here comes not from strength, but from knowledge and authority. And sometimes the line between guidance and tyranny is thinner than a candle wick. A child runs past, laughing, her hair tangled with straw. She trips and scrapes her knee on the mud-caked path. You wince, and a neighbor rushes over, applying a cloth and whispering a quick prayer. Wounds are dangerous. Infections can kill faster than wolves or famine. You remember the last time someone in the village lost a finger to a minor cut that became gangrenous? Quirky detail. Some peasants believed that placing a frog on a wound would draw out illness, though historians still debate whether it was practiced widely or mostly rumored. You shake your head, smiling faintly despite the grim reality. Afternoon drags, the sun climbing high and then beginning its descent. You carry water, tend the animals, repair a broken fence, and check the storage pits. Grain must be protected from moisture, rats, and pilferers. One misstep, one leak, and weeks of effort vanish into decay. The weight of responsibility presses on your back as heavily as the tools in your hands. There is no time for idleness. The medieval day is measured in survival, not hours. As evening approaches, you finally return to the hut, your body aching with exhaustion. The fire is weak, but you coax it back to life, the smoke curling through the thatched roof. Your spouse sets down the evening meal, a modest stew, thick with barley, root vegetables, and the occasional scrap of meat. You eat slowly, chewing thoughtfully. Each bite reminds you that food is a reward, not a right. Hunger is never far away, and the smallest feast feels extravagant. After dinner, the household settles into a fragile calm. Children play quietly, shadows flickering against the walls from the dying fire. You sit and inspect tools, mending a bucket, sharpening a knife, ensuring everything is ready for tomorrow. Every task matters. Neglect one, and the consequences can ripple far. The air smells of smoke, herbs, and damp wool, grounding you in the tangible reality of your survival. Night falls. The world quiet except for the soft crackle of embers and the occasional groan of the wind through the eaves. You pause to look out the window, watching the moon rise over the fields. The silvery light touches the rooftops, the fence posts, the muddy paths, casting everything in an eerie, ethereal glow. You breathe deeply, appreciating the fleeting beauty amidst relentless labor. Life here is harsh, yet moments like this remind you why survival is worth it. You lie down on the straw bed, muscles screaming with fatigue. Your cough is softened but lingers, a reminder of vulnerability in a world where illness is constant. You pull the blanket closer, feeling the rough wool scratch against your skin, and close your eyes. Dreams are thin and fleeting. The night is a fragile space where body and mind rest before another relentless day begins. As you drift, thoughts of the day mix with memories of past winters, near sicknesses, and small victories, repairing a fence, saving a goat, keeping the children fed. Each memory is a thread in the tapestry of survival. Scholars still argue whether peasants understood the full danger of daily life or simply adapted out of necessity. But you know the truth. Awareness and instinct are inseparable here. Sleep finally claims you, deep and dreamless, with the fire's glow fading to soft embers. Outside, the wind hums through the thatch, a lullaby in its own harsh way. You are alive, despite sickness, exhaustion, and the constant threat of misfortune. Alive to face another day, to endure, to survive. And for now, that is enough. Dawn arrives like a reluctant guest, pale and watery, brushing the village with light, but leaving the chill untouched. You open your eyes to the familiar creaks of the roof and the scent of damp straw. The cough in your chest reminding you that nothing is truly gone. The night has passed, but fatigue lingers, settling in your shoulders and knees like a heavy cloak. Today will be like all the days before. Work, toil, survival, and small glimpses of relief. You rise, feet meeting cold, uneven boards. The fire is dead. The embers are gray ash. You strike flint, coaxing a spark, careful not to set the thatch alight. Smoke curls into the rafters, acrid and familiar, filling your lungs with the scent of home and survival. You tug on your tunic, the scratchy wool clinging to your skin, and step into the chill morning air. Even in the village, the day is not yours to command. It is a series of obligations, each demanding attention. The fields await. The autumn harvest is pressing, and failure here could mean hunger in the months ahead. You shoulder your tools, boots thick with dried mud, and trudge through the frozen ground. Your hands ache already, fingers stiff from yesterday's work, but there is no rest. You pause only to glance at the horizon, where mist curls over hedgerows, the sun just a hint of gold behind a veil of gray. The world is beautiful and merciless, all at once. You remember yourself at that age, thinking you were invincible, believing the world would bend around your desires. Now, experience has taught you differently. The world doesn't bend. You bend or break. You pass neighbors at work, faces grim and weathered. Some scowl, some nod, some offer brief greetings as they hoist baskets of grain or mend fences. There is camaraderie in shared suffering, a subtle acknowledgement that no one here survives alone. Every action is entwined with another. A fallen fence could let a cow escape. A delayed harvest could starve a family. You have learned to respect that delicate balance. The sun climbs, barely warming the frost-hardened earth. Sweat drips beneath your collar, mixing with the grime and soot of your life. You wipe your brow with a rough cloth, tasting the salt of effort. Nearby, a blacksmith hammers iron with rhythmic precision, sparks flying into the cold air. You recall tales of those sparks igniting thatch, barns, and even entire houses. Quirky, yes, but dangerous, and historians still argue how common such accidents were. Some say frequent. Others claim exaggeration for moral storytelling. Either way, you keep a wary distance. Midday brings little relief. You pause for water, dipping the bucket into the well, tasting the earthy liquid, hoping it is safe. Disease is always near, a hidden threat that can strike without warning. One misstep, one sip of contaminated water, and a family's world can collapse. You remember the fevers that swept the village last year, the whispered names of those who didn't wake, the hushed prayers for stranger souls. Survival is constant vigilance. By afternoon, exhaustion sets deep into your bones. You bend to haul hay, lean on the plow, tend to animals, all while keeping an eye on the darkening clouds overhead. A storm could wash away days of work, ruin harvest, and leave you exposed to the cold. Even simple tasks are fraught with danger and uncertainty. You consider the stories of peasants in other villages, how a sudden frost destroyed crops, how a barn fire left families destitute. Life is a precarious tightrope here, and one misstep can topple the delicate balance. Evening approaches with slow reluctance. You return home, boots heavy with mud, hands blistered, body aching. Your spouse has started the fire, the smoke curling into the rafters, filling the hut with warmth and smell. The children are quiet, tired from a day of play and work alike. You eat a humble stew of barley, turnips, and scraps of meat, tasting nothing and savoring everything. Each bite is a small victory, each swallow a reprieve from the relentless demands of life. You sit by the fire afterward, inspecting tools and repairing what you can. A bucket split, a fence post loosened, a cracked pot you mend what is broken, because tomorrow will demand everything you have. The night is quiet except for the faint wind through the eaves and the soft murmurs of the household. You feel the fatigue deep in your bones, the ache of countless days, the quiet fear that survival is never guaranteed. Outside, the moon rises, casting silver light over the village. Shadows stretch long, the world reduced to shapes and sounds, the murmur of animals, the whisper of the wind, the distant clatter of a cart on muddy paths. You think of those who have gone before, of the many faces whose lives were hard and brief, of the labor and fear that never ends. Historians still argue whether peasants fully comprehended the risks they faced daily. But you understand it intuitively. Every movement, every decision is a negotiation with fate. You finally lay down, the straw bed cold but familiar, the blanket rough against your skin. Your cough is softer tonight, but present, a reminder of vulnerability. You close your eyes, letting your body rest while the world hums softly outside. Memories of toil, of survival, of small victories and enduring pain drift through your mind. You focus on the fire's warmth, the rhythm of breathing around you, the steady pulse of life persisting despite adversity. In these quiet moments, the lessons of the day and all the days before coalesce. You have learned endurance, patience, and humility. You have felt fear, loss, and exhaustion, but you have also known laughter, relief, and the quiet pride of survival. The world outside is harsh, unyielding, and often cruel. Yet within the small walls of your home, amid the smoke, straw, and warmth, there is continuity, there is life, there is hope.